seat that start to find a seat that works for you, where you can settle in. Where you can find your breath. Maybe your eyes close. Maybe your gaze simply drops. Make room for your belly to soften. There can be a real bottom to top breath through your lungs. As you breathe that way, see if you can give a little bit more attention to your pelvis. Notice what you notice there around your hips and the drop of your legs, how you make contact with the ground. See if you can find the tasting surface of your tongue rested up on the hard palate of your mouth behind your teeth. Even though your lips are closed, see if you can keep a little gap of space in your jaw hinge between your upper and lower teeth. In any place that wants your attention, other than what we've talked about so far. Give it more breath. Give it light. And then you can rest the backs of your hands on your knees. Bring your thumbs to your pinkies, thumbs to pinkies. And then close in your index, middle, and ring fingers so they're really close together and very long. Like a Girl Scout pledge. So it's almost like you're holding up, if you want to look this way, if you're not sure. It's almost like you bring them all together. So it starts with kind of a 3 and then they come together. The mudra of the higher intellect, buddhi, but also the mudra of water. Ask yourself to be like water. And its ability to move around any object in its way. Sometimes move through any object that obstructs. Be a support, be a weight. Maintain that sense of self, even in the presence of external forces. Water is still water in the presence of cold. It's just changed its perspective. Be like water. Give yourself a breath all the way in. Your fingers unfold. You turn your palms down. Your eyes are closed. They can start to open. If you're sitting up on something, move yourself off of it. And then you're moving down onto your back, and you'll need your ball to start. When you land on the floor, you start with your feet flat, just so you can notice what you notice about how your legs are in space. Move the ball over to your right hand in preparation. And then press your feet into the mat, into the ground, to lift your hips up just enough that you can slip the ball underneath your right butt muscle. So when you do that, really think about the back side of your bum, the biggest muscle of the group, glute max. And find a spot where you can just drop your body weight into the ball. So not against bone. You might be aware of bone, but not on bone with the ball. And you can certainly stay this way, just resting your body on the ball, letting the ball move into the muscle over the ball. Or it might be that you stretch your right leg a little bit and roll into the pinky edge of your foot, onto that knife edge. And then let body weight sink in there. Feel how your pelvis might tilt differently now. And you can stay with stillness, or make tiny movements with your pelvis side to side, super small, so that you move on the ball a little bit. And Kelly, just make sure that you're on the pinky edge of your right foot, not on a flat right foot, so that your knee can open up. I think that might be what's happening, but I just want to make sure. Yeah? Almost like you're going to extend your right leg out long, resting it nice and heavy. And you can keep those little movements side to side, or you can find a spot that needs attention and drop into it. Some of that movement might start to feel a little bit like a circle in whatever spot that you've found. A hula circle with your hips. Just creates a small bullseye on the muscle. But if you stretched your leg out longer, you might notice how it doesn't feel like you're dead center anymore, and you move just a little bit right of center. So you're moving more toward the outer edge. You got that? The dogs want the ball, I bet. And you can stay this way, where you can begin to take your right foot up onto your left thigh. So making a little bit of a figure four shape there. Flexing your right foot. And then again, find a little static place. Opening up your right thigh so there's really room in the hip hinge. And then you'll feel how that takes you more toward the outer edge. So that your right leg can start to feel like it's moving toward the ground and your hips start to move a little bit left. You might feel a little more action in the muscle. We're still mostly in glute max, but moving toward that edge of glute medius. And then you can push down with your left foot to move your hips a little bit left. So your body moves to a new place on the ball, more toward the outer edge of your glutes. Feels like you're moving toward the outer edge of your hip. You're still a good 3 inches at least from where you would meet up with your bony greater trochanter. Finding some drop there, maybe some movement. Feel free to come off the ball earlier than I do. Coming off it whenever you need. Noticing if you've lost the depth in your full breath. And making sure that you can breathe down to your belly. Giving yourself just a little bit more time here. Last couple of breaths for this leg. And then if you crossed your ankle up on top, keep it there, but lift your hips off the ball wherever you are. Take the ball out, drop your pelvis down, and then stretch both legs out long. And then just notice the difference between the two sides. Notice what your right leg feels like, how your right leg drops, how it releases. Notice that that's different from the other side. Good. And then you can bend both knees, both feet are flat, and start to set up the other side. Lifting your hips so you can place the ball underneath your left butt muscle. Just settling your body weight into it. Knowing that the two sides will feel pretty different. There might be a little movement there on the ball, side to side. Sweeping your pelvis a little left and a little right. Maybe a little circle. Doing a hula around with your hips. Change that circle and go the other direction. Feel free to let your left leg stretch out some. So when it stretches, you can fall open at your hip. If that works for you. And a different pocket for the muscle to be in, or for the ball to be in. There can be some movement there. The ball has a sort of twofold role. It can release tension, knots, where there's a lot of gnarliness, but it can also wake up muscle that may not know how to turn on by itself all the time. We don't think about the glutes being something that don't know how to turn on because they really get us around. Sometimes they misfire, or they don't fire quite right. Sometimes they're on all the time. We want to find that place where they can just be working the way that they're supposed to, really efficient. You can keep that action, or along the way, you can cross your left ankle up to your right thigh, in figure 4. And some lateral sweep left and right. Starting to move more toward the outer edge of your butt muscle. When you find a particularly interesting spot, pause there. Interesting doesn't always mean it feels one way or the other, right? Sometimes interesting feels like discomfort. Other times interesting is comfort. Sometimes it's discomfort that with Staying there becomes comfort, and vice versa. It's all information. See if you can move a little bit more toward the outer edge. So there's a little movement of your hips to the right, a little drop of your left knee toward the ground, still opening up your hip. Notice what your right foot is doing. So it can really be flat and heavy on the floor. Notice if you rocked up onto your heel bone, really peeled almost all the foot off. I'll sometimes start to turn on some deep layer muscles in your hip that you don't need. A flat foot, full breath. Soften around your pelvis, soften around your pelvic floor. Be here just a little bit longer. Last couple of exhales. Good. And then press into your right foot. Center out and lift your pelvis. Drop down. And then stretch out your legs. Just notice what you notice. See if they behave more symmetrically now. See if they release in the socket in a similar way. They may or may not. Noticing is more important than what's actually happening. Awareness of your body and space. Give yourself one more breath here. And then you can bend your knees, make your feet flat. Roll over to your side. And you're on your way to all fours. So you can always add some padding underneath your knees. Choose if you want your toes to be pointed back behind you or curled underneath. Either is okay. And then start by moving your right arm and your left leg backward in space. And then come back onto all fours. Move your left arm and your right leg backward in space. Long limbs. Do it all fours. Do that one more time for each side, but have your gaze forward out in front of you. Other side. If you can keep it that way, your gaze stays forward, or when you reach back in space, your toes might hit the ground and your hips can sink back toward your heel. And then you come back to that starting place. You can stretch back and float, or stretch back and step, and then sink. And then all fours. Trading sides. Speed skaters. So your gaze staying forward is important, right? It sweeps back. That's it. So Kelly, when you go back like that, if you want your hip to go to your heel, you have to put your toes on the ground on the long leg. Yeah. And then you find a rhythm so that you move in and out of it whenever it is for you in a way that makes sense. A couple things start to happen here. So when you keep your gaze forward, starts to wake up the muscles around your spine so that your posture Just find its optimal place. Moving opposite limbs at the same time, whether you're staying in place or rocking back. This wires you across your body and across your brain. If you're staying in place without the rock back, you get that cross body, and you fire through your glutes. So turning on where you just freed up or woke up. And if you have the rocking aspect, you fire, and then you also bring fluid into your knee, synovial fluid of the joint, and stimulate some growth in the articular cartilage. Lots of possibilities. Notice when your gaze wants to go to the floor though, Josie. And anyone else can be Josie, right? So your eyes stay forward towards some sort of horizon line. Last few times. You'll notice that if you keep your gaze forward, stay a little stronger at your middle. One more time for each set of limbs. Good, and then pause on all fours. And then you're getting set up for pigeon. So you can use your props how you want to use your props for pigeon. You can use a bolster out in front of you for your arms to rest on. And you can have your right knee close to the bolster, your left leg out long. Right? A little something underneath your right hip is always welcome. You might decide that you want the bolster underneath your hip, so you can be up on top of it, propping your right thigh and your right hip, having your left leg out long behind you. Another option. You might say that the bolster is too high for that and decide that you want to use the blanket. Depending on what kind of surface you're on, you might have a blanket toward the back of your spot to lay the top of your foot into. Just for some padding. So choose the spot that's best for you. And then allow yourself to stay more upright for a little while. So it's kind of split the difference, so Kelly, so you can be down on your elbows rather than feeling like you've got to be all the way up or all the way down. Yeah. And then you can focus on how your left leg can get longer up behind you. Kind of like that speed skater action. Notice if your body falls dramatically left or dramatically right. So you can stay in the middle. And then when you're ready, if you're ready, you can always come down a little bit lower. So perhaps you've got a bolster there, your forearms can stack. Your head might come down onto your forearms. Try not to ever get to the place where you feel like you've let all the air out of the balloon. Right? There's always some buoyancy, how your body is in space. So even when you get to a depth in the fold, a depth in the coming forward, there's always some amount of resisting gravity there. And it's smaller and smaller the more comfortable you get, but there's always some meeting that gravitational drop. So even in your deepest fold, press against the ground a little bit with your forearms. You just resist gravity 2%, 1%. It's a really subtle isometric. Some action in the muscle while it's releasing. You always have permission to ease out of the shape before the instruction comes. We'll stay here just a little bit longer. Give yourself a few more moments to settle. Use the ball to wake free. And then you engage your mobility. Actively move the spot that you woke up. And enjoy the low load, long duration drop, passive opening. Both the muscle and the connective tissue. More exhales. Deconstruct and come out slowly. Run up to your elbows, curl under your back toes, push the floor away with your arms, curling your belly. And then you can start to move that toward all fours. Just move your hips a little side to side. And then start to set up the second side. So the two sides may not need to be propped exactly the same. They may need very different things. So honor that for yourself. Maybe it is the same and you keep the props as is. You start to explore having your left shin forward and your right leg long. And listen to what your body tells you. Right? So it might mean that you are able to drop in right away, or you might need to take a lot of time. Investigate how your pelvis is, whether it wants to fall in one direction or the other. And then when it comes time for you to perhaps move deeper into the shape, Keep everything that you've established, the length, room between your shoulders and your ears, space across your upper back. And if you do go deeper into it, you feel if your body receives it, great. But if you start to go into it deeper, then you feel some immovable resistance or some sharp sensation. Back away, move a little bit, and then revisit going into it. But if you're not ever asking yourself to go into pain, you might go into discomfort. You still have a conversation with your breath when there's discomfort. Not so much when there's pain. You might notice that when you're breathing now, still feel your breath dropping down toward your abdomen. So you might be aware of your breath across your upper back differently. See if you can have a little drop of your right shoulder, Josie. And sometimes that might mean moving your left arm out to the left a little bit. Mm-hmm. Know that you can come out anytime that you need. So if you start to get tingles in your foot, sharp sensations in your knee, definitely come on out. Still noticing where your tongue is. Exhale. You can slowly start to make your way up if you went down low. If you've got something underneath you, keep it for a moment as you pull in with your lower belly. Shift your left knee out on both knees. And then you can move anything that was underneath your arms or your chest out to the side. And lie down on your belly. And just rest there for a moment to notice what you notice. Notice how your pelvis lands on the floor. You point your toes back behind you. Notice how your heels release. Notice the overall weight in your pelvis. Good. And then you're going to start to move onto your left side, and you'll need your block and your ball. And when you're on your left side, you can just be on your left hip. You'll need your block either at the flat height or the medium height. And that is so that you can bring your right thigh over the top of it. The ball goes onto the block, so that then you can drop your inner thigh against the ball. The block, ball, inner thigh. And if you think about the inseam that runs from your inner knee up to the top of your inner right thigh to the groin there, that's where you want the ball to be. So you can just find a static place to be there with the ball. Drop some body weight into it. And then if you move your pelvis a little forward and back, so that you can roll the ball along the surface of the block there, and just trace that inseam of your leg. Always find a static place to be. Move closer to where your knee is, but you don't want to go onto the actual joint. You're just working in the adductors. Josie, see what it's like to have your left leg, the one that's not rolling, stretched out on the mat. Yeah. And then you can stay here on your side, or you can use your right hand and drop it down toward your left armpit. And you roll your gaze down toward the floor, almost like you're going to go to sleep on your belly. And by turning your pelvis down some, you will get a lot more body weight into the ball. If that's too much, you back away from it. And then if you're there, you can incrementally, centimeter by centimeter, let the ball continue to roll up toward your inner thigh. So it's probably not perceptible to your eye right now, but I'm moving my pelvis in such a way that once a second, the ball gets a little bit higher up toward my inner thigh, up toward the groin. It's often a place where you will stop breathing, stop having that sense of freedom. And then when it feels like you can't go any higher, you retrace that and allow yourself to retract, deepen at your hip crease, and slowly roll down the inside of your thigh in the direction of your knee. There's a lot of sensations in there, and most of them are intense. As long as they're not sharp, you slowly roll through. A spot we get to explore very often, inner thigh, the adductor. It affects when it's locked up or not awake. It affects how we get around. It affects the medial side of your knee, it affects your feet, arches, your ankles. You want it to be awake. And once you get close to where your knee is and there's no more room to roll, just pause. Good. And then reach for the ball, take it out. Roll across your belly and go to the other side. It can be intense work to work inside your hip flexor there. So when you're on your right side now, you've got the ball inside your left thigh. So work where you can work. So if that means being on your side and just letting the ball have a spot where it can be static, great. Maddie, if you turn your block so it stays flat, but turn it from being this direction to this direction, yeah. And then you just get a little bit more surface area for the ball to be rolling. And once you've found that spot, you can roll the inseam. And adjust where the ball is. Different place to roll on. At any point, you can stop and just be still. Being with it. Notice how you're breathing now. Notice if your breath got shallow, that's a good indication that maybe the intensity of the ball is more than you need. Back off the body weight a little bit. And let the ball position, or you can position the ball somewhat closer to where your lower femur is, close to your knee joint. And then you might turn down a little bit toward the floor like you did before. The belly sleeping position. And then in that space, you can be still. You can slowly and incrementally trace the inseam of your thigh. When you get to the spot where you can't go any higher if you're exploring that roll, then you slowly start to move back down. Let your breath be the thing that gets you through it, so that when you get to a tricky spot, you get to a sticky spot, slow down your breath. And when you get to that spot where you can't roll anymore in the direction of your knee, pause there. And then you can peel out the ball, move away the block. Just take a moment to lie down on your belly. And notice your legs. Notice the weight, the release, both sides. And then start to come up onto your elbows. You come into what feels like a little sphinx. And if your low back doesn't like the back bend, you can move your arms a little bit more forward, just so there's a little less compression in your back. Start there, just simply breathing. Allow yourself to get heavy at your belly. This can be a staying place for you. Or you can pull your left knee into a bend out to the left side, that sort of sleeping position, and then touch your right fingers to your left shoulder. Stretch that back out. Place your hand down. And pull your right knee into a little sleeping position, bent out to the side, left fingers to your right shoulder. And you can stretch that back out. See if you can do those two things at the same time. Your knee moves, you touch your opposite shoulder. Your knee moves, you touch your opposite shoulder. And then you can keep that, but now turn your gaze, see your knee. Return. Draw it in, see your knee. You can keep that, but when you're drawing in, your right hand can reach over by your left elbow. And then you can take it back. And then when your right knee moves, your left hand can move over by your right elbow. And you can see. You can keep that, or as you draw in, your right hand might touch your left knee. Boop. Opposite. Your left hand might touch your right knee. Boop. And then you can move where you move. This salamander crawl. So you get to mobilize that space that you were just waking up. You get to turn on the muscles in your waist. You get to rotate your spine. And you control the movements of your head. So there's a lot of pieces in play. Be it the version that works best for you. Two more times. One more time. Good. Pause. And then you can press up your hips, walk your knees forward. Come toward in all fours. Sweep your feet off to the side. Have a seat. And then you'll need your block and a bolster or something like it. And if you want to take a look for just a moment, when I go down onto my back, I'm going to lift my hips so that I can elevate my hips on the block. Just want to make sure that you're really on your bones and not underneath your spine here, so really on the pelvis. And there's a couple of options how you can use the bolster. You can slip it under your legs So it's more of a wedge. And let your legs drape over. The bottom edge of it kind of slips away from you a little bit. Your knees open and your soles get close. They may or may not touch. Okay? So that's one version. So there's less opening in your hips in this version. Or you can flatten down the bolster and have the soles of your feet come together on top of it. And this one has more opening. Okay? So you elevate the whole opening. So you can choose either one of those. You kind of split the difference between the two by using the wedge and having your feet on the wedge. It takes a little bit more paying attention because it moves a little bit. So you can have the wedge with your knees over, you can have the bolster flat or pillow flat, or you could split the difference. Getting more of a passive opening now across your inner thighs, across your adductors. Elevation, more prominent in your pelvis. If along the way you feel anything in your low back, that might be a good indication that your block is higher than you need it in terms of where it is supporting you. So if it's feeling a little bit funky in your back, see where the block is. You can use your hand. And if it feels like it's anywhere against your spine, then slide it lower, really behind your hips, behind your pelvis, behind your butt. The arms might be out to the sides. You can also be on your body. Your hands can be on your body right now. Your shoulders are willing. You might have more of an overhead reach with the arms. Being where you can really drop in, really let go. Noticing where you might be holding. If anything has changed in your breathing. Where is your tongue? You always have permission to come out sooner than the instruction. Last 3 exhales here. And then you can slow motion your thighs toward each other. So especially if you're more open, flex your feet, press your heels together, turn on the muscles on the inside of your leg just enough to guide in. Your feet can step flat onto the bolster. And then really focus on curling your tailbone forward in your body to lift slowly off your block. And then release your hips down. Pause for a moment there. Pull the bolster out and then stretch out your legs. And again, notice just how things land, how they drop. Give yourself a whole breath in and out. And then you can bend your knees and roll to your side. Come on up to sit and find your ball. So I'll get close to the camera for just a sec here. The target that you're going to be rolling on, so if this is the front of your hip bone, like here's the bony part, you're going to be rolling below that. So bone, and then you get into soft tissue just below that, and you'll want to roll just a little bit lower still. So that's where the ball is going to be. It's right at the top of your rectus femoris. So when I have the ball there, it's going to be right about on that spot. Right? So watch for a second. So when I'm on the floor with that, I'm going to find that spot so I can find the bone, go right below the bone, thinking about being center. And I can just be there, right? I could put a little support underneath the block, underneath the ball to bring it up higher, but I don't really need that kind of intensity on this spot. It's going to be what it is. So you can be here, you might end up bending a knee along the way, and that'll drop some different body weight into it. With the bent knee, you might lift your leg, and I'll say all of these things. With that lift and bend, you might grab your own foot. And then you keep it close, and then you might lift it again. Right? So building into this deeper connection of the ball going into the top of that rectus femoris, okay? So you can lie down on your belly, and the ball's going to go under the right side first. So if you tuck it in front of your pelvis on the left side, so right at that bony bit, and then slide it down a little bit below that, a spot where you can just drop into the ball and rest on it. And that might be enough. It might feel really subtle, and that's totally fine. The muscle is very close to the surface because you're up at the top of it. You get into the tendinous connections of it. If you want to stay there, great. If you want to bend your knee, bend your knee. And then still, it's just body weight. You can stay there. Or begin to lift your thigh, your knee off the ground. Now you can feel if you do that, that there's more contraction to your muscle. As a result, you get a little bit more sensation. And because you're resisting gravity, your pelvis starts to go down a little bit against it. That changes it. If you want to add a reach back, you can send your hand back for your foot. And think about bringing your foot in closer to your butt. You can keep that. Or you can press your foot against your hand and let your leg lift up behind you. Always avoiding the sharp. Experiencing the sharp, come down and reposition. Right? Only with this for a few minutes. Good. Slowly lower your thigh. And if you've got the grip, let it go. Move the ball out to rest on your pelvis for a moment. And then do the other side. So you slip underneath the left side there. The ball goes right in front of the bony part, right on the edge of your ASIS. And then you can go below that. And you can have your head down, just your body weight on the ball, pressing against the muscle. Happily stay that way. Or you can add some bend to your knee to drop a different kind of weight into it. It might be that you keep the bend, or you can, with or without grabbing your foot, you can lift your thigh. If you're grabbing, you can bring your heel closer into your bum. And then you can add that final piece if you like by pressing your foot into your fingers. Try to keep your head heavy while you do that. And then see if your thigh might come up away from the ground. Good. And then slowly release. Take the ball out. And flip over onto your back. And then once you're on your back, stretch your limbs to the ceiling. So you don't need any props for this. Legs to the ceiling, arms to the ceiling. Always room for your knees to be a little bit bent here. You're just coming into this shape. You're taking that muscle that you were just kind of waking up and having it do part of its job, which is to flex your hip. Happily stay this way or move in opposition. So your left leg and your right arm can move away from each other toward the ground. And then it comes back up, so all your limbs are up. You're only moving two limbs at once. So your right leg and your left arm move in opposition. And then back up. And your left leg, right arm. And no need to ever touch the floor when you come down back up. Right leg, left arm. Some contralateral movement. Also using the muscle that you just woke up. In and out of it, side to side, opposite limbs. You'll notice your abdomen waking up too. Notice if you move fast in either direction. Right? Slow toward the ground, slow toward the ceiling. Slow toward the ground, slow toward the ceiling. A few more times. One more for each pair. And all your limbs toward the ceiling. Bend your knees. Hold onto your knee creases and rock up, or you can roll to your side and come up to sit. Good. Find your belt if you have a belt. put a loose loop in it. We're going to use a passive bridge, restorative bridge shape for your resting pose. So I've got a loop that's just big enough for me to be able to step my legs through it. That's off to the side. I'm going to place a bolster behind me that eventually I'm going to come up to sit on. Take my blanket. So if I take it the way that you may often find it when you're here, and fold it one more time. So it's that same width, but it got skinnier, and then that's going to get rolled up. So it becomes like a pretty dense pillow. It's nice to punch it flat a little bit. Have your washcloth or whatever you're using for something behind your neck, and that can just be in your hands if they're ready. And then I've got my block out in front of where my flattened roll is. And then once I've got all that together, I step my legs through my loop, and then bring the loop up around my thighs, and tighten it. It's reasonably tight. I'm not trying to come into a really tight shape there. Sitting up on top of the bolster, and things will definitely have to get shifted and moved, so think closer in with everything rather than further out. Because when I recline back, I want my shoulders to be down on the ground once I get back there. So I can bring my heels up onto the block, start to recline back, extend out through my legs. So the blanket gives a little support to my legs in case they want to hyperextend. Once I've got my shoulders back on the ground, then my little roll can go behind my neck. Take a little neck roll. And then let it become rest. Make sure that you have your heel bones on the block rather than your Achilles tendon. Arms can be out toward a T. Always deconstruct and reconstruct your bridge in some other fashion. But it gives some length to the front side of your pelvis, even though you might feel the shape most at your chest opening up. Letting yourself find rest. Now you see if you can narrow your toes together so you don't have any rollout. That's where the strap comes in handy. So if you tighten your strap a little bit, it might also help you keep your thighs from rolling. And try to make sure that your shoulders really drop down. Yeah. Even as you rest, keep the little space between your upper and lower teeth, the connection of your tongue to your roof. Still attempt to bring your breath down to your abdomen. Feel the bottom to top quality of your lung expansion. Josie, I just want to make sure that your shoulders are down, so they feel like they're on the ground. And you can even tighten your strap as you're going back a little bit, Josie, if that feels okay. Your exhales might drop you just a little bit heavier into the ground. And that last little bit of release. You really receive gravity. And you can start to let your breath come in a little deeper, a little fuller. Wiggle your fingers. Move your head a little bit. Feet can step down off their support. Step on to whatever is behind your knees. Decide which way you want to tumble onto the floor and roll slowly off of your prop. And when you get to your side, you can loosen up your strap. And then find your way up to sit. You might bring your hands together or place your palms on your body. We are one life, we are one light, we are one love. It's with gratitude that I bow, honoring the divine in each of you. Thanks so much for showing up. Thanks for being here. Good to see your faces. We are coming to the end of Zoom offerings now that we've got sort of a robust return to in person. So I believe next Tuesday is going to be the last Tuesday Zoom. But double check your emails, double check the schedule. But I believe it's next Tuesday is the last one before we're fully back in person. Okay.